Hi and welcome. There's a new study on diabetes, and it's called the Indian Council of Medical Research India Diabetes Study. It's a cross-sectional population-based survey assessing a representative sample of individuals over 20 years or age 20 and above, drawn from urban and rural areas of 31 states, including all the parts of the country and the National Capital Region of India. So this study obviously tells us about how diabetes is prevalent today, but more importantly and interestingly, there is the incidence of pre-diabetes, and the figures which we will come to very shortly are, to put it very mildly, worrying. To understand this study and how we should be looking at it and what we should be doing about it, more importantly, as individuals, that's you and me, as well as from a public policy perspective, I'm pleased to be joined by Dr. R.M. Anjana, the Managing Director of Dr. Mohan's Diabetes Specialities Centre, which is a WHO collaborating centre for non-communicable diseases. And she is also the Vice President of the Madras Diabetes Research Foundation, which is an ICMR Centre for advanced research on diabetes, and they've run this study. Dr. Anjana, thank you so much for joining me. So, I'll fill in the details later on that. So let's jump into it straight away. So at a very broad level, what is this telling us about diabetes and its prevalence in India at this point?
So thank you so much for, picking up on this article. I think it has a huge importance because right now we are talking about India's metabolic health report. And we're talking not just about diabetes, but also pre-diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and dyslipidemia or cholesterol levels. So we're talking all of this together. And what we're showing is that there are huge increases in the number of all of these factors that I just mentioned from earlier reports. Now, this is done in the ICMR India Diabetes Study, or INDIAB study for short, which has been going on since about 2008. Like you rightly said, it's funded by ICMR, but also by the Department of Health Research, Government of India. So here what we've done is state by state by state, in India being such a vast and diverse country, we have looked at very representative population in terms of socioeconomic status, population size, demography, etc. And we've looked at in each of these states, how do all of these metabolic risk factors, how do they work and where are we right now? So overall, across the country, we are seeing increases. We're seeing increases in urban areas. We're seeing increases in rural areas. Now, the urban prevalences, as you would expect, are higher in all of these things, diabetes and hypertension and obesity and everything, is much higher in the urban areas compared to the rural areas. But one of the significant points that the study is looking at is the prevalence of pre-diabetes. Now, how does one progress? One doesn't progress suddenly to diabetes from normal like that. It appears like that to the individual person. But in the body, you go from stage of normalcy to the stage of pre-diabetes, and then you progress on to diabetes. So what happens is that a large proportion of these people with pre-diabetes will future convert into diabetes. About 60% in 2 to 5 years is the kind of conversion. So when you see these, if you look at the country overall, right now, today, the diabetes levels are high, mostly in the south. There are some parts of the north, Delhi, Haryana, all of those regions. But you have some central areas that are still lower in prevalence that you would see in some areas of the northeast. But the important point here is that wherever you see lower prevalence of diabetes, we're showing very high prevalences of pre-diabetes. So what does that mean? In the near future, all of these states, which you are, falsely thinking are, low prevalence now, are all going to start converting. And all of these people with pre-diabetes, so in the next 5 years, we're going to see these alarming numbers increasing. You may see plateauing in states that have already reached there, but these huge, the numbers are going to keep exploding in all of those. So this is how it looks for diabetes at the moment.
Got it. So the figure that I have from your study is 11.4% of the population, or roughly 101 million, have diabetes, and 15%, or 136 million, have pre-diabetes. So now what's driving this, and including that interesting demographic insight that you brought in about South and North having higher levels and Central India and Northeast heading in that direction?
That's exactly what I said. So the common thing about all of these is that since they're on metabolic end series, they have common risk factors. So diet and physical activity alone, kind of explain about 50% of all of this stuff put together. So now if you look at, just look at dietary patterns over the last 10, 20 years, look at physical activity levels, look at obesity levels. All of these things have undergone drastic change. Now you add COVID into the mix, and then is like a multiplier factor here. So dietary habits are largely unhealthy with too much carb, very less fruit and vegetable intake, and high in salt, sugar, fat, etc. So this is common everywhere, not just in urban but in rural. You take physical activity, it looks just quite dismal as well, because people are becoming more and more sedentary. And now with COVID coming in and just work from home, people barely move from one room to another, leave going to office and coming back, and all that has become like a weekly phenomenon now. So barely, what is your activity level? You move from bedroom to kitchen to bathroom and you sit again. So with this, there is a compounding of your physical inactivity. People are not exercising anyway, and all this is compounding. Now, this has moved to children also. So when you see this is a further risk factor. Add in stress now. Stress levels are increasing everywhere, all ages, everybody, who's not stressed. So naturally, you will see that when these things come together, it all leads to obesity, hypertension, then diabetes, so it's all kind of linked.
And your study also exposes in some ways or provides insights into how things are interregionally in the country. Can you tell us more about what you've seen or are seeing?
So that's what I was trying to describe. So when you look at diabetes, there are clear regional differences where it's quite high. So let's do this. Let's talk about it by GDP. So where the GDP of the state, or you can talk about the Human Development Index that we have mentioned in the paper. So for those states that have high GDP, high HDI, you have high diabetes. That's how it works. States which are lower on these factors are also lower in terms of diabetes, but this will change because there is this demographic transition that is happening across regions. Having said that, obesity is all penetrant. So all across all states, if you look at the map, we have these color-coded maps that we have in the paper, you'll see just red everywhere in terms of all over the country. So once obesity increases, next stage will be that, diabetes increases. Similarly, hypertension is high overall and more so in rural, maybe because of smoking, very high in the Northeast.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of smoking there. So that could be also contributing.
You touched on complications and COVID, and I know during COVID, the people who were in some ways likely to be more affected if they had COVID, or all factors being constant, including having COVID, if you had prior conditions like these, then you were likely to be more ill or more affected by it. So, but today, so COVID is perhaps one aspect when this is more historical. But what is the complication that arises? As in, why should people worry about what you found?
Okay. So this is a very good question because diabetes, everything, affects everything from your head to your toe. So the primary ones are, of course, your eyes. Okay. And diabetes is a very avoidable cause of blindness, something that should not happen these days with good control of blood sugar. It can also cause kidney failure, to put that very simplistically. And again, this is an avoidable cause completely. If you're not careful, it can cause gangrene of your foot leading to amputations. It can cause nerve damage in any part of your body, your feet, anywhere. So that can lead to further heart attacks you can get, like vascular problems, you can get stroke. So diabetes is a silent killer in many ways because on the outside you look fine, but if your sugars are uncontrolled, one by one, the internal organs are getting affected without your knowledge.
And what happens at the pre-diabetes stage? I mean, you could be living with it from the way data seems to suggest and not knowing about it, which I am assuming is the problem with most of India in any case.
It is. I think you got that right. So that appears to be the main problem. So with pre-diabetes, the good thing about pre-diabetes, it gives you a window opportunity for action. So that is where you should find. So a lot of the pre-diabetes comes with obesity. It comes with everything I just spoke about, not the lifestyle changes. You focus on that in this kind of population. So if you don't want to do it in 1 billion, if you want to, do an intervention that's going to work, do it in this population. So pre-diabetic population, because this population can progress, I said, but they can also regress and they can go back to normal. So that I think is the golden window that we have, and that is where effort should be, to see that more and more people fall from that pre-diabetes or becoming diabetic. They should move into the normal category.
And how would that happen? Is that medical intervention, or could it be possible without that?
Lifestyle intervention, just diet and exercise alone. And if you add some stress element, yoga, pranayama and all that, just that. It's not really rocket science. So weight control is very important. Every kilo that you gain increases your risk on someone who has a genetic predisposition for all of this. So weight control through healthy living, which includes dietary restriction of carbohydrate, increase in fruit and vegetable, increasing physical activity, decreasing your sedentary time, taking care of stress, smoking, alcohol, all of this together goes together. And they're not rocket science. It's not something that people don't know. It's just that people don't practice it. That's all.
And what would trigger the testing? Because unless obviously you've tested, you don't know. And if you don't know, then life goes on.
So that is the very important one, right? So people have to screen. So these things run in families. So if you have parents, even a parent with diabetes, then anyone above the age of 20, it's better to test. If you have a family member, a blood-related family member, again, it's better to test. If you yourself are overweight or obese, it's better to test above it. So there is this thing called the Indian Diabetes Risk Score. It's a simple scoring system in which you can just enter your age, your family history, etc., and it tells you your risk of developing diabetes. So if you're low risk, which means you have a score of less than 30, you can wait. Nothing is going to happen in the next 4 to 5 years. If you're between 30 and 60, it's better to keep an eye on all of this and get tested, say, within the next 6 months to a year. If you have a score of above 60, it is possibly mandatory for you to get a test done immediately.
How do I find out what my score is?
So there are 4 questions, and I can send that out. It's available online. It's called the Indian Diabetes Risk Score. So it takes into account your age, your occupation, your family history, and how active you are. These are the 4 questions. And a single, your waist measurement, your pant size. You just enter that and it gives you a score.
Okay, so let me come to the public policy aspect of this now. So this is a problem that we've known and have been living with for a few years. So what should be or can be the public policy response to address both ends of the spectrum, which is your pre-diabetic as well as your diabetic population?
So I think this has to be done at many levels, but primarily mass education. People need to know that there is a problem and there is a solution to the problem. It's not fatalistic where, it's not like that. It is a problem. Yes, you have to know, but you can do something about it. So making this a priority, I think, is number one. So obviously the only people who can reach that level is the government. So governmental efforts are already there actually. So the Ayushman Bharat scheme by the government of India, it has introduced 150,000 wellness clinics in the country. So that is one very effective scheme. So more schemes like that, by massive education to people about what are the risk factors and how they can be controlled is one. Number 2, I think individuals knowing their risk and trying to take up the responsibility for looking after and preventing themselves is important. What can be done in terms of dietary changes, etc. Now, when you talk about physical activity and you tell somebody to walk, there have to be safe places that they can walk. So, places like parks and things like that have to be available. Foods. Now, when you say eat healthy, again, there's a question of availability and affordability. Fruits and vegetables are expensive. So trying to bring down that and making it available for everybody as opposed to giving large volumes of rice or wheat is possibly another policy decision. Putting tax on foods that are unhealthy and are going to make you sick, like sugar and fat and things like that, make it more unreachable. So trying to, and in a general thing, you go to a supermarket, what is the availability of healthy foods? And there are lots of claims about what is healthy, but are they actually healthy? So, putting those things in place, I think would go a long way. A lot of people want to be healthy, but just don't have the, you have to make it available to them. You have to make it accessible to anybody. And that's when they're going to choose the healthy options.
So what's the one or two things that you would recommend that one should avoid, which have high sugar content and are easily available, maybe on supermarket shelves or elsewhere?
All the good things in life, I suppose, right? So everything that's sweet and delicious are kind of high in fat. So bakery products, high sugar, substances, including cakes and stuff like that. But also stuff that's very high in carbohydrate. So there's plenty of people who don't eat, bakery or sweets or cakes or anything like that, but they're eating a lot of rice or a lot of wheat. So this high carbohydrate mentality needs to be replaced with something that is high in fiber and protein. The population is deficient in protein as a whole. So trying to give, increasing the protein intake and fiber intake, they go together. And then automatically everything else comes down. So that would be a simple take home.
And what made you specialize in diabetology, and what's been the journey like so far? And I mean, and let me sort of supplement that very quickly. Is it frustrating sometimes that, because the numbers seem to be rising all the time, that you're fighting in some ways? I mean, it's not a losing battle, but it's not a winning battle either.
Yeah, I think to make it win, it cannot be one or two people. It has to be effort at so many levels by people coming together. And I think that is the strength of this paper, where you start and people like you, the media, where awareness is the first step to success, right? So awareness is the first step. So I think that's where we are at. And I don't like to say that we are losing this battle. I think we are on the way, and it takes time, but we will all get there. Nobody wants to be unhealthy, right? Nobody wants to, it's just that we are not there yet. And once we can, I think we will reach there ultimately.
And why did you choose this particular discipline?
Mine is mine's a very funny story, because I chose this when I was 3. Both my parents are doctors, and my mother has been my inspiration. My father has been my hero. So my father's a diabetologist. We're a family of diabetologists. Right from I'm third or fourth generation now, and my mother was an ophthalmologist. I've seen healing, and I've seen this right from the time I was a baby. So when I was 3, I used to be my mother's, the slide boy. We used to have those around carousels where so I used to do other stuff, and I used to say I'll treat diabetic retinopathy. I had no clue what it was. But so I think my parents were my inspiration, and seeing them doing what they did, making a difference, I think that's what made me, do what I'm doing today.
Right, and till your next report, and in a sort of, I mean, like a somewhat broad answer, or maybe you can make it specific. So what are the 2 or 3 things that you're focusing on?
So for us, now we are going to each of the individual governments, and we're submitting this report so that they know what needs to be done in their state. That is number one. We're also, the ICMR has also taken, Indian Council of Medical Research also has also taken a good stand for, making more implementable projects and things like that. So they have reached out to people all over the country, including us, asking for, solutions to problems. So we're working on many things. We're working about this very remission that we talked about. We're working on remission of diabetes. We're working on trying to find other ways and means. We're also trying to get healthier foods. So in food technology, we work. So healthy snacks, healthy foods, availability of all of this. So there's a lot to be done. And I think the more people are involved, the better for everyone.
Dr. Anjana, thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.